All right. So again, we're going to go through two different keys, even though it's one portfolio assignment. As I said a few minutes ago, some of these terms in here, you're not going to have, oops, geez, it keeps moving around. There we go. Some of these terms aren't in your batch because we didn't need to go through certain things with the heart, with conduction, and a few other things. But yeah, I think for the most part, these are pretty straightforward. Then we get into some identification. I think for the most part, these are also pretty straightforward. We do have the apex of the heart. This is not pointing necessarily at one of the chambers or areas of one of the chambers, because we've got E and F are two chambers, and then J and K are the left side chambers, and then L is going to be what we call the apex. Now, I think as far as it goes, most of these vessels are, I think all of them, the pulmonary trunk and the pulmonary arteries. We've got pulmonary veins coming back over here for D. Okay. The superior vena cava, aorta, aortic arch. Now this one here, A, is pointing to that first vessel that comes out, kind of that distribution artery that comes off of the aorta. We call that the brachiocephalic. Remember, these kind of go alphabetically, B, C, and S. Okay. So anyway, there's the, and again, this is being recorded, so you don't have to sit there and scramble trying to jot stuff down or type stuff in. And oh man, back it up, back it up. No, don't worry, it'll be in YouTube. The date class, I think, is already in YouTube, so you can certainly watch that if you want as well. Same with this. For the most part, I think all of these we discussed and looked at. The only one that's a little oddball is letter R. So you don't even have to do letter R if you don't want to. Pathway of blood, again, I think pretty straightforward. We touched on this really from day one in unit 8. So we enter from the superior and inferior vena cava into the right atrium, and then so on all the way back and out the aorta. So remember, it's chamber, valve, okay, and then chamber, valve. Okay, and of course, we've got a couple of blood vessels in between. Okay. And then the tunics, this one's really straightforward. I don't think you need to spend too much time stressing out about this one. Letter D is pointing to a valve. That may be one of the oddballs there that may be difficult to see what they're pointing at. And then we've got a couple of artery identifiers. And again, I think all of these are the lines. I tried to get them so they were pointing as closely to what I'm hoping you can see. And again, I tried not to put too many arteries or veins that are really oddballs. So anyway, we've gone over all of these already. So you'd want to refer back to your slides that we looked at on Tuesday. And certainly these are directly from Visible Body. So, keep plugging away with Visible Body and you'll find these images in there as well. Okay, so anyway, I think those are all pretty straightforward. Yeah. Yeah, for the most part, we're sticking to the lower abdominal region and the pelvic region. We do have a couple out here over with the arms. Again, we've got the ulna and the radius, so they just call these the ulnar and radial arteries. And then we've got some major veins. Again, no tricks or anything, nothing crazy with these. We looked at the subclavian or right subclavian vein heading into toward the armpit or the axillary region. And then we had a cephalic vein over here, a brachial vein for letter E, and then the basilic vein for letter D. And then we've got left jugular vein, external jugular and internal jugulars over there at F and G. Superior vena cava again. Okay, same with this one. I don't think there are any on here that are too terribly out of control. Got the median cubital vein. I think that might be about it. I took all the rest of this out. Okay, good. So that's it for that. We're gonna move on to the next batch. Let's see. One of those I think might okay, hold on here. Let's see. It's this one. All right, blood and lymphatic. Now, how do I share that? Okay, share screen. Blood, lymphatic, immune. Okay. Yeah. All right, here's the other one. There's a couple of items. Again, I think the the terms and definitions, you guys are all doing awesome on those. And again, some of these I eliminated. I did want to mention, I don't think I left these in your assignments, but I will mention these penia and philia as far as some sort of disorder goes. Blood disorders, we oftentimes see them. Emia is another one you'll see, EMIA. Emia just generally is a condition of the blood. Now, penia usually means some sort of deficiency of something. So if you do see penia at the end, it means usually a decrease or deficiency, whereas philia has an affinity for, so it usually means an increase in something. So anyway, I don't think that I didn't put those in yours anyway, but you will have a pathology class at some point, and certainly next semester and this semester we talk a little bit of pathology, certainly this semester. But yeah, you'll see penia and philia come up on occasion. Okay, here we go. We've got a blood typing. This is going to be in your activity, so your answers are going to vary because it's randomized. I will tell you though, you're going to have 4 blood types. You have B, AB, and O, right? AB, and O. Those are your 4 blood types. You're going to do 4 patients. So probably going to have one of each. All right. Well, which one it is, again, that'll vary because it does mix it up from student to student. So anyway, what you're gonna have 3 dots of blood for each patient. So patient 1, he's gonna have, or she, 3 dots of blood. They're all the same person, same blood. Okay, 3 dots. Now you're going to have 3 different reagents or vials of antigens. You're going to have, or well, they're anti-A antibodies. So an anti-B, and then we're going to have anti-RH, which they call anti-D. So what we're looking for is the presence of clumping, and it'll look pretty obvious when you see it. We looked at some blood smears and some, not blood smears, we looked at blood typing a little bit last week. And again, the clumping or coagulation that you see is very obvious. When you put a drop of your reagent with the blood and stir it around, if nothing happens really with the blood, then that's no clumping. Okay, so that's what you're looking for. You're looking for clumping. If there's no clumping in A or B, so you're going to have 3 separate little vials, drip for one, drip for the second one, drip for the third one. Hey, you're going to, if you see 0 clumping in A or B, then you're going to have O blood. So no clumping is O blood. Okay, if they both clump, we say that's AB blood. So it walks you through it very nicely. It's fairly straightforward. Now the RH, they also call anti-D. That one, if it clumps, then it's RH positive. Positive for clumping means RH positive. So if you have no clumping in A or B, but you do have clumping in RH, then you'd have an O positive blood type, for instance. All right, now for letter A, if we put an anti-A with the first one, anti-A means against A, all right? Anti-A. The opposite of that would be pro-B, right? Anti-A means, in essence, for us right now, it means pro-B. So if anti-A or pro-B clumps with one of these, then that person is not that blood type at the very least, right? So if anti-A, we put a little drip in, stir it around with the blood and it clumps, that person does not have A blood. Okay. Anti-A, pro-B, and it clumped. So yeah. If anti-A gets put with blood, we stir it around and it doesn't clump, then that's pro-B blood and and it didn't clump. So we have a positive for B blood. So anti-A, okay, no clumping means that's a positive for B blood. Okay. Anti-B, if we put a little squirt of that and stir it around, that means pro-A. And again, if we don't get clumping, that's A blood. If we do get clumping, then that's B blood. Now, if this sounds like a lot of, weird talk, drivel, I'm my own grandpa type stuff, spinning in circles. That's okay because you will do more blood typing next semester in advanced. And then you'll have some clinical courses that you'll do more blood typing. So by the time you're ready to walk down the aisle and get your diplomas or your degrees and blood typing will be so second nature to you. But because we do spend quite a bit of time making sure that you're getting a pretty good grasp of it. Now, so this is many of your first time doing blood typing. So I think again, it's really important initially to just understand that no clumping anywhere with the A or the B means O blood. No clumping for either one is O blood. Double clumping for both of them is AB blood. So if you can get that down, then you're halfway home. Okay. And then the anti-A and anti-B, like I say, we go through it in general, we go through it again in advanced, and so again, if anti-A clumps, and that can't be A blood. Okay, it's pro-B that we're adding to it that clumps. So it's like adding A and B together, they clump. All right. Let's see. And again, the RH one or the anti-D, if you do that one and it clumps, then it's a positive RH. All right. So if you have clump, 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 yes, 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 then you have AB positive. Okay. All right, we've got a blood smear to look at as well. We see that again, the bulk of a blood smear is going to be red blood cells. This is kind of an unusual blood smear. We do get a little bit of everything on this one. So letter E, all of the little pink discs, those are red blood cells or erythrocytes. And then the letter E. Letter B are little tiny platelets. And then the rest of these that stained purple and are either a little bit larger than red blood cells or two or three times as big, we know those are definitely white blood cells. We do see some of these white blood cells have definitive granules. They also have kind of oddball shaped nuclei and a lot of different coloring going on. These are going to be those granular cells or the granulocytes. This is the philic group or the phils. Okay, and neutrophils, remember, are the most numerous. In this particular slide, we do see two neutrophils. And again, they have kind of that oddball triple or quadruple kind of sectioned curvy nucleus. Okay, and the other thing too is the cytoplasm and the granules, they kind of stain. They don't really hold a lot of the stain. So you see that's kind of a light, very faint kind of bluish purple color in the cytoplasm of white blood cell, of that neutrophil. Okay. The other two that are very granular, we see that one is really pink and one is really kind of a deep purple. So the pink implies that we've got acidic going on. So this is one of your eosinophils. Pink is again like with your pH strips, right? You get the if you have a fish tank or a swimming pool or something, uh, okay, the pink implies that its pH is acidic range. Okay, so that's eosinophil. Then we have the darker, deep blue violet kind of color going. That's going to be a basophil. Then we come over to these two. We don't really see much in the way of granular activity going on. We have more of a solid, distinct, and extremely large nucleus. The other thing we see is that so these are not your fill groups. These are your agranulocytes. So these will end in site. These are monocytes, monocytes, and lymphocytes. Okay. Now, monocytes are going to be typically the largest of the white blood cells. So we notice that letter D is quite a bit larger, really, than even these guys up over here. So monocytes usually pretty obvious. And again, monocytes are in small numbers. Eosinophils and basophils also in very small numbers. Like, these two are 1% or less. And then these guys, I don't know, maybe 5 to 10% at the most. So generally, we don't see much of these three. Letter C, your lymphocytes, these are the second most common behind neutrophils. So neutrophils are the bulk of your white blood cells, with lymphocytes coming in second. Okay, and lymphocytes are the smallest. They're range in size from a little bit bigger than, or even about the same as a red blood cell, to maybe 1.5 times the size. So anyway, that's what's going on with that blood smear. I think that was it for that stuff. Now we've got Mr. Lymph here, or Mrs. Lymph, or Ms. Lymph, or just the lymph model. All right. Well, letter A is pointing into nothingness. So that area, there isn't a heck of a lot going on there. That's that right lower quadrant. We would say that's probably the appendix. Okay, if there was, if we did have the abdominal viscera in there, that would be where that's going. We'll see the appendix next week on Tuesday when we get into the digestive system, but it does have some uh, a little bit of a role in immunity. Anyway, kind of a curveball. That's why I'm stumbling a little bit. The appendix. All right. So anyway, I don't have one, by the way. Mine was removed. Um, I think, let's see, like December 22nd, 1988. Yeah, a long time ago. December 22nd, 1988. I was 13 years old. It was the last day of school right before Christmas break. We were supposed to do a Christmas play. I was in 8th grade. Yeah, 8th grade. I lived right across the street from school, and both my parents worked. So I was a latchkey kid. But by 8th grade, though, hell, you get your own apartment at that point, right? So anyway, uh, yeah, that day, that the 22nd was the Christmas play was that evening for the whole school, and so we were going to spend the whole day going through all of the usual rigmarole for the big play, make sure everybody knows their lines and is me tuned up and whatnot. So anyway, yeah, I went to school that morning. I was kind of hunkered over, and shoot, by about 10 o'clock, man, I in the morning I could hardly even function. And I never missed school. I was a healthy kid for the most part. I didn't get sick or what. I got the perfect attendance, all that. So I knew something was wrong, bad. So anyway, they sent me home and told me just take it easy, and called my mom, and she said, "Oh, yeah, it'll be fine." And so anyway, I laid around till about 6 p.m., maybe 5 p.m. that night, and my parents both came home from work, and I was green. I was about the color of Mr. Lungs back there, uh, and in a sweat and in a ball. It was like an altered state from about 10 a.m. until about 5 p.m. Of pain. I can't speak for labor pains or anything like other than my wife's, kind of feeling her own. But oh God. So anyway, yeah, my dad took me up to the back up to the doctor, and they had my appendix out, and probably by 9 o'clock that night. And then I got to go home. I think I went home late in the afternoon, early evening on Christmas Eve. So you were one. Oh, yeah, in 1988. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Yeah, Stephanie, you've got a question related to blood. Sorry about that. Let's see. Yeah, I didn't notice the chat was blowing up. Too busy babbling. You could type it in, or you could get on the audio feed. That's totally up to you.
Well, it's easier just to say it. So, I have O negative, and my husband has A pos, and my first son was born, and then they gave me the Rogam shot for in case I had another child.
Yeah.
So I got the Rogam shot, and then I got pregnant again, and they gave me another Rogam shot before I had my second son, and he still was Coombs positive +3. So I'm just curious, like if I got 2 Rogam shots and then a third one after I had my second child, then why did he have Coombs if the Rogam is supposed to prevent the
Well,
Coombs?
Stephanie, we know that you are an unusual odd ball. Well, there you go.
You're not wrong.
Well, you've had mono, right? So I mean,
Yes.
all bets are off. I'm telling you guys, mono it's a real bugger. It can affect your immune system. It can affect maybe the blood typing. Maybe I know they would have checked you. They would have been for sure what your blood type was. And
Yeah.
maybe, I mean, but after the first one, so did you get the first shot after the birth of the first one, or right before it was
Yeah.
born, or?
So I had my first Rogam shot after my son was born, and he's A negative, my first son.
Mhm.
And then I got another one during my second pregnancy, and then my second son was born, and he's A positive. And then I got another one after my second son was born. But he still ended up with Coombs, so
Huh.
I don't know. I don't know.
Well, I
I
don't
just thought that
know.
was really
That is
weird.
odd. Yeah, that is strange. Maybe that giving the first shot, so the first son's negative, but they give you the shot anyway after he's born. That may have done something too. I mean, granted, it's, I don't know how, 4 or 5 years, right, between your kids, 6 years.
Yeah, 5 years.
So, that seems like a long shot, but
Yeah.
it's hard to say. Some kids are stubborn. Is it, is he stubborn?
Oh yeah.
Well, there you go.
I
So,
just thought that was really strange because when I watched your morning video on blood and you were kind of going through like how the Rogam shot works, and I was thinking like, how did my second son have Coombs if the Rogam shot was supposed to prevent that?
well, there are other, certainly many things too, right? Maybe, and again, it's a long shot because of multiple shots, but
Yeah.
maybe it was a bad batch, but 2 bad batches. Maybe your
Yeah.
body responded in a way that just basically just negated it or something,
Okay.
or just, I don't know. It's
Yeah.
hard to say. I think, well, what it does go to show is that none of this is slam dunk, right? None of what we do is absolute, and thankfully he's healthy. I mean, he's doing fine, and he'll continue to be healthy and doing fine. But at the same time, it is a little bit strange, and it does. I mean, yeah, we're practicing, right? Practicing medicine. So I guess we're all kind of guinea pigs in their minds to a degree, and it makes you wonder if you would have never got the Rogam shot, would anything have happened negatively or not? Of course, that's hindsight. We can't go back in time, but
So it would make sense that my first son has the negative because I'm negative,
oh
but then
sure,
my
yeah,
second son
yeah,
would
yeah.
have positive because of the Rogam, or
Because
because
of the
that
dad, yeah,
because
because
okay,
the yeah. Now when you have okay, so I don't want to get too far
sorry.
no, you're fine, but I do want to I could go on and on, but I do want to we go through at the toward the end of next semester, we do a genetics and heredity unit, and in that unit we go through what are called Punnett squares, for determining like, dominance, and, like eye color and hair color, and stuff like that, recessive versus dominant. And we do one for blood typing because so we can put any kind of combination in and show, mom is, whatever, O negative, dad is AB negative or AB positive. We could do Punnett squares and find out what are the odds or the percentages, that the child is going to be this blood type or this blood type. Because there are instances, I mean, if you've got a parent who's both parents are O negative and the baby comes out B positive, then something's fishy, but for the most part, your children are going to have one or the other of the parents blood type, again, for the most part. There's genetics are not absolute either. There's plenty of anomalies there. So yeah, we'll kind of analyze that, and maybe it may answer some questions even a little more about that. Same with, you know, um, we'll look at like how can a baby be born with and keep. Now, a lot of babies are born with blue eyes and they convert to being hazel or brown or something, but can a baby have blue eyes and keep blue eyes its entire life with two parents that have brown eyes? Um, and the answer is yeah, absolutely. But anyway, so we'll look at that. We'll look at how that could be possible. And then we'll look at blood typing and some of that. So yeah, we do a little genetics and heredity unit as well. Uh, okay, so I think that's it. Not to push you off, but yeah, that's a tough one to answer. I don't really sure. I'm not really sure. I don't know if anybody could answer that regarding whether, not that I'm the beacon of knowledge or by any, or the fountain of knowledge or anything like that, but yeah, that one, chalk that one up to um, an anomaly or an outlier. Okay, let's see. Okay, so we have a new share going on. We're still all right, good. All right, I think we made it. You guys have let me go over to Blackboard again, real quick, like, and pull up a couple of reminder type items. I did put um, the weekly slides are in there, so you should be able to. There we go. Weekly slides are in there. So this one's in here. Respiratory system. I did put the link. I know some of you clicked on that down in the chat, and then the Zoom class sessions, of course, are in there as well. And it seems like there was one other item of note. Oh, the exams. Yeah, of course. Exams 8A and 8B are in there, as well as the review questions. The review questions for 8B, I've got them pulled up here. I think there's about 70, 75, somewhere in that range. There you go. 73. Yeah, that's right. I had, went through this earlier, but I can never. They've got, as you can see, I got a lot of irons in the fire, a lot of windows going on. But I think this was in the 90s. Yeah, 97. Okay. So you've got about 97 questions in your test bank for exam 8A, which again is going to cover blood and heart. Primarily, again, quite a bit of the blood chapter, and then just part one of the heart chapter. Okay. And then when you look at 8B, that gets into some of the basics of blood vessels and the basics of lymphatic structure. Doo-doo. So anyway, we can go through those next week if you guys want to. I know you've got a lot. You guys have a lot going on. You're probably still thinking about working on your portfolios for aid. You're probably not ready to do your exams, but you might be. And if you are, and if you're going through some of those review questions this weekend, and you're stumped because there are a couple in there that we maybe didn't go over or we didn't dive in that deeply. So just shoot me an email if you're unsure about any of these as you're reviewing them. Um, Other than that, I don't think I have anything else to say other than we're going to move forward into Unit 9, respiratory tonight. And then next Tuesday, we're going to do digestive. Woohoo! That's probably my favorite system. I know a lot of you put that's your least favorite system. But I'll change your minds. I promise. Well, hopefully, even throughout this semester, as we've talked about some of the important aspects of consumption awareness and how all of this chemistry that our cells need to function at a fairly normal rate, and how the blood is carrying all of these items, and how do we get all that stuff into the blood? Well, we do some of the groceries come in and the garbage goes out with this system, the respiratory system. Some of those groceries come in and go out via the digestive system. So that's kind of the next stop here, or the next stops. I guess it's kind of two stops, as we kind of move away from cardiovascular and segue into respiratory. So that's kind of the plan. Again, some of this is going to be review because we've talked about the respiratory system already. I mean, really from day one in Unit 7 with the cardiovascular, or Unit 8 cardiovascular. Let me get captions. Oh, there we go. So yeah, when we started with blood last week and went into the cardiac aspects and then blood vessels, lungs were always involved, right? Pulmonary, or at least discussion of gases and then lungs. So I think that's probably where we started, just talking about what is in plasma. What's the function of red blood cells, right? And we say, oh, there's some carbon dioxide, there's some oxygen. So we've got these gases. We already knew oxygen was a big deal. So anyhow, how do we get oxygen into the blood and how do we get carbon dioxide out? Well, we have to send the blood over to the lungs and then send that blood back to the heart. So again, a lot of this info is going to be pretty straightforward. It's stuff you've seen before. Some of it is going to be maybe a little bit new. We're going to go through just again mainly the macro structures of the respiratory system. Now we're going to start with dividing the respiratory system up into upper and lower respiratory tracts. And so you've probably seen that and heard of that at some point. You've probably had an upper respiratory infection at some point, or at least know someone who has, right? You've probably had, gosh, I hope not, but I'm sure you guys have probably, you've lived pretty healthy lives, but I'm sure that at some point maybe there was a lower respiratory illness going on, maybe some bronchitis or something. Hopefully nothing as bad as like pneumonia, but anyhow, so we'll divide the respiratory system up into upper and lower. The upper tract, really, we're starting at the nose. The mouth isn't really involved with breathing. We can certainly exhale through the mouth and Of course, we mouth breathe when we don't have any other choice or any other options. If our nasal passages are clogged and our sinuses are clogged, but generally we think of the nose and then the associated structures as we work our way in to the nasal cavity, and then what we call the pharynx. And there will be three sections of pharynx. You can see those listed there: the naso, oro, and laryngo terms. You can also see pharynx. Let me get my pointer. There we go. So you can see pharynx, kind of a funny word, Phary, fairy, and then an inx, pharynx. And then we see larynx is same spelling, just with an L instead of a PH. So anyway, the upper respiratory tract starts at the nose, ends right around the voice box or the larynx. So we'll take a deeper look at those, and then we'll dive down into the lower tract and get into the windpipe a little bit, and then the segments of the bronchial tree. And then, of course, we'll look at the lungs as a whole. All right, and then we'll see a couple accessory structures. We see the sinuses are a big deal. The some of our lymphoid glands that we saw, the tonsils last week, those are accessory structures to respiration as well. Why do you have a respiratory tract? Well, certainly we need to exchange gas, right? We need to get carbon dioxide out. We need to get oxygen in. So there are other things that have to happen, right? We have to distribute that air. So the nasal cavity, sinuses, and the rest of the respiratory tract are structured in a way that enables us to distribute that air effectively. So we'll talk a little bit about that as well. And then again, the gas exchange, I think that goes without saying at this point. And then filtering air. So we also, there are a couple other things kind of associated with the filtering air part. We need to filter the air. So we'll see a lot of cilia. We need to kind of humidify the air, especially this time of year. It's very dry. So we need to humidify the air. So we have some specialized structures for that. And then we also need to warm the air up, right? We need to warm the outside air, again, especially as we get closer and closer into winter, but even inside during summertime, right? It's not like we keep the temperature at 98 degrees in our house. It's almost always going to be somewhere in the 60s or 70s. And so we want to get the air warmed up a little bit before it gets to the lungs, where you do see a 98.6 degree temperature. So how do you warm anything up inside of the body? Well, blood is a good idea. So we're going to see quite a bit of vascularization as well throughout the respiratory tract. So anyway, so oh, mentioned cellular respiration. So first of all, the word respiration, the word ventilation, these are synonymous. They both mean they both mean gas exchange. We're exchanging some sort of gas with some sort of other gas. And in this situation, like I said, we're talking about oxygen and carbon dioxide. So as air is coming in, we call this external respiration. And then once we start divvying up the oxygen to the body tissues, we call that internal respiration. Ultimately, it leads to cellular respiration. So, and that occurs with, remember, the mitochondria. So, mitochondria are responsible for converting oxygen along with glucose into ATP or energy. So, again, the whole point of having the respiratory system is so we can get oxygen in and get that oxygen to the ultimately to the mitochondria. And then conversely, we need to get the CO2 out. So yeah, right, everything, all roads lead to the cells, right? All roads lead to the cells ultimately. So next week when we do digestion, we'll look at instead of the gases getting delivered to the cells, we'll look at the nutrients. How do we get these carbs, proteins, and fats, and vitamins, minerals? How do we get those delivered to the cells of the body? And that's going to come through the digestive system. And again, it's going to be more blood. Yeah, the blood is going to be delivering all of that, and you guys know all that already. Couple of images in this slide show. Several are going to be from OpenStax. They have the figure 22 whatever at the top. These are going to be from OpenStax. I did put some of my own illustrations and images in here as well. So anyway, that's just as a side note. So here's the visual for it, as opposed to all the black and white that we just looked at. We've got the nostrils or the nares in the nasal cavity. Okay, we could see a couple ridges. We'll talk about those as well. And then we kind of work our way back toward the pharynx or the pharyngeal region, and then down toward the larynx. And then that pretty much ends the upper respiratory tract. The larynx is the divider. And then we enter down into the lower respiratory tract, where we see the trachea, a couple of large branches called the bronchi. Okay, and then we've got the lungs and the diaphragm. And so anyway, that's very basic look at the respiratory system. Here's another look at it. Again, we see the nasal cavity. This time they divide up the pharynx into nasopharynx, naso, and pharynx coming together. So nasopharynx, and then the oropharynx. Oro means mouth, so the back of the mouth. And then the laryngopharynx, which is going to then, just connects up with the larynx. So the names of the pharynx in order tell us where we're located. Nasopharynx toward the back of the nasal cavity, oropharynx toward the back of the mouth, and laryngopharynx heading down toward the larynx. That takes you to the voice box or the larynx, and then again down and we can see into the trachea, and we can see some rings with the trachea. And then again, we've got our right and left primary bronchi, and then several branches, till ultimately all of that air is going to go into what we call a bronchiole, and then finally into an alveoli or an air sac. So again, this is just your intro. We're going to see basically the rest of this show is going to be breaking down each of these sections. So let's do that. We're going to start at the nose. Again, it's primarily cartilage, and then we've got some bone involved, right? We'll see the ethmoid bone and the nasal bones. We'll see the maxilla bone, the vomer. So we do have some bones that make up part of the nasal cavity, and there's certainly a lot of cartilaginous aspects as well. Okay, and again, we've got the two nasal bones up top. Okay, and maxilla at the base. So the floor of the nasal cavity is going to be the maxilla bone. Okay. Then we'll see the palate bone or the palatine bones separating the nasal and mouth cavities as well. Okay, so the maxilla and palatine kind of come together and form that palate of the roof of the mouth. Okay, and if that what we call a cleft palate, we talked about this with skeletal. If the maxilla and the palatine bones don't come together or fuse, then we have a cleft palate. So let's take a peek inside the nasal cavity. And first thing we see again is bright blue. This is looking actually at the nasal septum. So this is the wall. There's a wall right down the center of your nasal cavity that divides left and right sections of the nose, and that nasal septum is going to be primarily at the front made up of cartilage. So we do see a blue hue, and blue always means low oxygen and certainly cartilage. And then we see the bone aspect, that nice, pretty kind of tannish color. And we see the ethmoid bone, the cribriform plate, and the perpendicular plate of the ethmoid. And then the vomer or the plow bone, along with the maxilla and palatine, kind of making up the floor. But that nasal septum is primarily going to be these four structures. We're going to see the cribriform or the perpendicular plate of the ethmoid, the vomer, and then we've got some cartilage out front. Okay. Just really I don't know how important it is for you to know the exact specifics of the nasal septum. I think it's important to understand that we do have a wall that separates the left and right nasal cavity or sections of the nasal cavity, and it is made of cartilage in the anterior portion and bone toward the posterior aspect. And we've already looked at the vomer, the plow bone. We've already looked at the perpendicular plate of the ethmoid. So again, I don't think it's too big of a reach to kind of visualize where this nasal septum is. Okay. We also have, while we're in here, we've got a couple other items, kind of accessories. We're going to Claire's, right? To accessorize, we've got the frontal sinuses. And then again, toward the very back, we find the sphenoidal sinus. Okay. And then even further back, we find the pharyngeal tonsil, or again, what we call the adenoid, okay, or the adenoids. You have more than one. Okay. And again, we'll be looking at more of that as we go. So cribriform plate, roof of the nose from the cranial cavity. Okay, so cribriform plate, that's the roof. And again, maxilla and palatine bones make up the floor. Okay, we've got a little bit of the frontal bone here and a little bit of the nasal bone, but you could see the roof of the nasal cavity. It's quite large. Okay, there's a lot of space up here. Okay. And then again, the sphenoidal sinus in the back. All right, we have three passageways as well. Let me find there it is. So we have three. I'll go back to those others in a few seconds, but we do have three passageways of airflow. We have a kind of a lower passageway, so we could just again, one of the main functions of respiratory is air distribution. So we do see a lot of folds, a lot of curves, a lot of convolutions and off ramps and side ramps. So we can distribute air all over the place. And so the superior aspect, we can kind of bring some of that air up into these superior sinuses. The middle region, we could kind of funnel some of that air back to the sphenoidal sinus or some of these ethmoid sinuses. With this lower kind of pathway or track, we can funnel some of that air into the maxillary sinuses. So we're going to get air flowing in. It's going to go into the nasal cavity. That lower pathway is going to take us right into the maxillary sinus. Okay, and then we go up to the middle section, and that'll take us out to the sphenoidal sinuses, maybe into even back to the ethmoid. And then we go into that kind of the top floor pathway, go up to the third floor. That'll take us to the frontal sinus. So we have three pathways of airflow and three levels of airflow and air distribution. And here's kind of a side view or a lateral view. See all of these little sinuses or these air pockets where air travels through. Now, these little ridges or grooves, we call them conchae. So you can see that term there. And we mentioned that way back when we were doing the skeletal system. I think at least briefly, we might have kind of glossed over it and said, oh, we'll look at that next time. Or the next time we see that, we'll look at it in the respiratory system. So that's what we've got going on here. The conchae, those are those ridges in the bone. And again, you can see them from a frontal view as well. You have an inferior, middle, and superior conchae. Okay, let's go back to some of the black and white of it. So three passageways: superior, middle, and inferior meatus. Right, a meatus, that's like our ear canal, it's like a channel. Okay. And the nares, those are just your nostrils. Those are the openings. And then they go into what we call a vestibule, right? A vestibule, again, just like when you walk into Walmart where the red box is and the phone, where you can exchange your phone for money. That's the vestibule. Nowadays, they've got somebody there with a tablet. Doop, 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 right? So anyway, that's an entry, the vestibule. Okay. So what's going on? Why do we need the nasal cavity? Why do we need these accessory organs, the sinuses? Well, we need to clean some of that air right off the bat. So we're going to see a mucosal lining. We're going to see pseudostratified epithelium. Yeah, we see those cilia, goblet cells. So there's a little bit of mucus constantly being spritzed to the surface or to the lumen of the respiratory tract, especially that upper kind of the nasal area, the sinuses. Then we also see it in the trachea. Okay, so again, pseudostratified ciliated columnar epithelium, complete with goblet cells to secrete that mucus. Okay. And again, the cilia are going to be, they're kind of like little bristle brushes, and the mucus is kind of sticky. So the cilia are constantly moving, and the mucus is kind of moving with it, and particles are getting trapped in that mucus, and then we move them out or we pull them. Anyway, we try to get rid of them, right? We blow our noses or right? And again, if stuff, we see this in the lower tract too. So this slide, a similar slide comes up later because, we're constantly moving gunk up out of the lung. So if it does go past that upper respiratory tract, any of those microparticles, dander and dirt and dust, the lower tract can certainly help to remove that. So anyway, we'll look at that. So the sinuses are lined with this epithelium. The nasal cavities lined with this type of epithelium. Okay. A lot of action up here. And again, if these are clogged up, these are clogged up, the sinuses. And then we clog up the nasal cavity. Okay, now we have to bring air in somehow. So it's going to come in through the mouth. And so again, the mouth can get dry. We see this again a lot this time of year. The air's drier. So what happens to the mucous membranes? They're going to be a little more hyperactive than usual. You can kind of hear it in my voice. I always get a little stuffier the drier it gets because it's just your nasal cavity, your sinuses, those goblet cells are just trying, they're working harder to humidify the air. It's funny, it's like a yo-yo. Really starting in about I don't know what, March and going through around October, my dehumidifier's on full bore all the time. And now, I couldn't pay that thing to come on. Now I want a humidifier, right? I need to humidify the air over the next, basically November, December, January. If it's the next 4 months, it's a battle of humidifying the air. So in the meantime, we all are having to kind of get used to that. And so we'll be a little maybe more stuffy as our mucous membranes and our goblet cells kind of start humidifying things. And then if it really gets bad, then we're mouth breathing, and then the back of everything. That's what leads oftentimes to colds and viruses of opportunistic invaders. So yep, you gotta keep that nasal cavity area clean. Yeah, yep, absolutely, Carolina. Yes, for sure. Yep, bloody nose. And again, there's already a lot of capillaries up here anyway, because we not only do we want to filter and humidify the air, we also want to warm it up. So we do see a lot of uh,
Say
we do.
night.
Good night.
Say night night, Lincoln. Lincoln. Say night night. Night night.
Good night, Lincoln. Yep. So yeah, yep, yep. So yeah, bloody noses this time of year. Absolutely. Let's see. Kind of as a side note, have any of you heard of a neti pot? You'd see them now at Walgreens. It used to be something you'd have to go to like Shakti or one of those stores, up in Madison, or I'm sure they have them over in Milwaukee area too. Like a specialty kind of a frou-frou shop is what my wife calls them, but I don't know what they've got essential oils and whatever. But yeah, neti pots. Put a little saline and some water, stick the thing, pour it through, and it comes out the other side. Ooh, that'll get things going. That'll really activate the ball and get it rolling down the hill. Anybody ever tried a neti pot? I've tried. I like it. Yeah, I don't do it often. I haven't done a neti pot in years. I don't even know when the last time I did. Huh. Probably about 3 years ago. Yeah, 2 or 3 years. I think I was living in Rockton. I think I did it. I think there was mold in our basement. It was just, I was constantly blown up. Um, but yeah, yeah. It works, and I'd done it before then too. So, and they say you have to have the angle just right, and it's got, you don't want it draining to the back, so, and you do want it to filter all the way through, and you don't want to do a hard, snot rocket, farmer's blow, whatever they call it, when you're shooting, blow, you want to do it kind of subtly because the idea is, you got all that stuff in there. But anyway, neti pot. It's old. It's ancient. I think it's Ayurvedic, which is from India. Okay, so a couple of things. This is a good slide. It shows us all kinds of stuff. This is from your OpenStax. This is the upper airway. So let's work. We're leaving this nasal cavity. Let's move into the pharyngeal region. So the first part of the pharyngeal region is called the nasopharynx. So that's going to be this spot right in here. And then as we go a little bit, so where is that relative? If you looked in the mirror and opened your mouth, you would see, right, that little dangly jobber in the back. That's the uvula, and that's also the soft palate. So if you go a little bit further beyond that and up, that's where you're going to find the pharyngeal tonsil and the kind of where the eustachian tube. You can see it says opening of the eustachian tube or auditory tube. So this again, pharyngeal tonsils, also known as the adenoid. Yeah, so adenoids oftentimes get removed. There's again a little auditory tube. There's a couple other little tonsils in here that they don't show. Very, very tiny. And then you've got the three that they always talk about are the pharyngeal tonsils or the adenoids, and then the palatine tonsils. Those are the two that you can see, in the back of the throat. And then kind of past the tongue and down, you can see that nice angle. Look at it, like a linear. Okay, zoop. You can see we've got what's called the lingual tonsils, and the tonsils of the tongue. So again, these are there exclusively to kind of help with some of the airborne pathogens, and the respiratory system is the number one avenue for any type of infection. Yeah, the COVID swab. So yeah, they put the COVID swab. So yeah, look at where that sucker's got to go. And the anosmia, right? Remember I was mentioning, I think they found that 80 plus, so higher than 80% of folks who have had COVID say that even if they were asymptomatic, so anybody who's been COVID positive, roughly 80 plus percent have said they experienced some sort of inability to smell and or taste. So so interesting. It affects something up in this area. Get the nasal swab. I don't know. I hear they're supposedly coming out with at home. The FDA, I think it was approved. They've got some at home tests, so you can get them sent to your house, or you can order them. At some point, you'll be able to order it off of Amazon, and it's like a pregnancy test, right? Just pee on the stick, and it tells you if you have COVID. Just stick a Q-tip up your nose, and comes out pink, you've got COVID. Comes out, blue, you don't, or vice versa. Probably blue would mean COVID. Pink would mean you're clear. Anyway, I don't know. But supposedly they're coming out with a home test. It's just funny because, if you're symptomatic, they're like, oh, stay at home, stay at home. But we want you to come out and get tested. So it's just such a weird conundrum that I think a lot of people are in. And again, with so many folks being asymptomatic, you know, it's just hard to tell who's getting it and who doesn't. By the way, too, if any of you get COVID, or any of you have it now, if any of you are caring for family members who have it. I mean, there's a lot of, there are a lot of programs, and you can get help. The school can help you out, but anyway, and also email me and let me know too if you have family members that are sick, or if you're sick, or if you need anything, because I can help you out, get you to the, get you what you need. All right. So anyway, three big tonsils. We're in the nasopharynx. And then finally, we look at the area we can see in the back of the throat when you look in the mirror. That's the oropharynx. And then we end up in what we call the laryngopharynx. Okay, so those are the three pharyngeal areas. We also have this epiglottis. It's kind of a little flap, as a little door. So we're going to take a peek at that in a little more detail. But this oropharynx, laryngopharynx area, that's a tricky spot. That's where we see digestive and respiratory kind of combining. And so we want to ensure that we don't get food or beverage traveling down the wrong tube. I mean, we've all been there, right, to some degree. So that epiglottis, when we're chewing food or drinking any type of beverage and going to swallow, the tongue is going to flatten out. And as it flattens out, this epiglottis is going to kind of shut or close the passageway or pathway down into the trachea. This, you can kind of see the hyoid, and it's almost like the hinge of the door of the epiglottis. There's certainly a bunch of other type of connective tissue involved as well. Yeah, the epiglottis. It's primarily cartilaginous. Okay, and then the last thing we see on here is the vocal folds, the vocal cords. This is going to be the larynx, or the voice box. So again, this is the upper airway. So I wanted to go look at a couple other items. Okay, so the black and white of it. As we leave the nasal cavity, we head into the pharyngeal region, or the pharynx. We can again see the nasopharynx, meaning nose and pharynx, oropharynx, mouth and pharynx, and laryngopharynx, meaning larynx, pharynx. So that's the pathway of flow of air. So as we're doing this, we're doing the path of airflow as well. You probably kind of figured that out. So pharyngeal tonsils, again, these are going to be the adenoids when they become enlarged. Okay, and then we also see the palatine and lingual tonsils as well. Okay, and so we looked at all three batches of tonsils. Okay, and then that again, I mentioned the pharynx is that pathway, or that connection with the digestive and respiratory systems. Okay, so we go through, they gave us a nice color-coded highlighting. We can see the nasopharynx in green, and the oro in blue, and the laryngo in purple. And here's a nice kind of illustration too of the epiglottis. You can see the hinge kind of right here, and there's some soft tissue. Okay. And it just closes. So as we swallow, the tongue kind of flattens out. And as the tongue flattens out, and the little boluses or boli, little balls of food that we're swallowing, they're gonna, as we make that swallowing action, you can almost see how that epiglottis flap would just close right over top of the trachea. Yeah. Let's see. Larynx. So again, the root of the tongue and the upper end of the trachea is where we're going to find the larynx, or the voice box. And again, we do see quite a bit of cartilage in that area. We have three major cartilage blobs. I think there's about 9 different types of cartilage total, just making up this kind of hyoid, larynx, epiglottis area. So I do have a couple slides that show that. Again, this one's from OpenStax. This is an anterior view, so this is looking straight on. We can see the epiglottis, even looks like a little tongue. And then the hyoid bone in front, and then we've got, again, some kind of a membranous layer of tissue there. Okay, and then the thyroid cartilage, that's a large chunk of cartilage that makes up a pretty substantial portion of the larynx. And then we have kind of in the center where the thyroid cartilage kind of comes together, we have what's called the Adam's apple or the laryngeal prominence. And again, this laryngeal prominence, we all have it. Males, it tends to be a little more pointy. And so what that does is it alters the shape of the vocal folds and vocal cords, thus creating a little different tone as air is passing through and by those vocal cords and folds. So laryngeal prominence. Yeah. And then we have what's called cricoid cartilage. Yeah, cricoid cartilage. So a lot of cartilage, very solid, very dense material. The thyroid gland sits right on top of this area. You can see it's moved down just a hair, but the thyroid is associated with that thyroid cartilage. Yeah. Just another viewpoint. Here's a posterior view. We didn't get this from this slide. This is a side view here. So again, you could see that epiglottis, how it would shut and close off the trachea. Here's a posterior view. This is looking from the back. You can see the epiglottis, and then we've got these other three. There are a couple more types of cartilage besides the thyroid, epiglottis, and cricoid cartilage. We have this corniculate and arytenoid. You probably don't need to worry about any of these. If you saw thyroid cartilage, you want to associate that with the larynx. All right, I'll leave it at that. And then epiglottis, you definitely need to know the epiglottis. And we'll see that again when we get to the digestive system. But yeah, look at these crazy little kind of spikes here. And again, those spikes are going to have, yeah, it does. There's not a lot. Yeah. I'm not sure. It is cartilage, so the epiglottis should appear to be more like this than red. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think they put it in red in this other one just so you could see it stick out. Yeah, it's cartilage, right? So it's going to be blue. But you can see it right here. Here's the bluish part of the cartilaginous part. So I think this is maybe just showing there's some of the extension of tissue, maybe from the root of the tongue. Like right here, like some of this that's connected to it. But yeah, the epiglottis is more of a bluish color or gray. It looks like cartilage. All right. We got the parathyroids, okay, behind the thyroid gland. Now, the other thing I want you to notice, because we're leaving the upper respiratory tract, we're going to head down into the lower. We made it to the larynx, so we're almost done. We're cruising. We're moving at a good clip. I do want you to notice as we segue into the trachea that we see these rings, right? These cartilaginous rings, and you can possibly even kind of palpate them a little bit. You can feel that there's definitely some relief in there, not this kind of relief, but like relief, right? I don't know, bumps. So notice they're complete rings in the front, but as we look at the posterior aspect, notice these rings are actually incomplete. So they're called cartilaginous rings. So the trachea, the first thing we notice is that it does have these cartilaginous rings, but the word ring implies something that's a circle shape. There we go. Can't see that I'm doing a circle, but yeah, ring, right? Well, these are a C-shaped ring. Well, whatever. I think you get the point. They're incomplete rings, okay, or they're C-shaped. Why is that? Why do we have, why aren't they completely solid? Well, we'll talk about that. We'll look. I think you could probably make some pretty safe assumptions coming up here in a second. But in case you haven't seen enough larynx, here's some more. So again, we've got the flap and then closing off that the digestive tract. Oh, vocal folds. As you can see, again, we have the true vocal cords are called vocal folds. And then we have what's called a vestibular fold. That's going to be this over here. The vestibular fold, that's going to be what they call the false vocal cord. Regardless, as air passes through, it's going to create some sort of a vibration, and thus you're going to get sound waves produced or created. Now, positioning of your tongue, positioning, there's a lot of factors to producing sound, right? So there's a lot of muscles down there. There's a lot of stuff we can do with our mouths and tongues, certainly. But yeah, the sound that comes out is coming from the lungs, right? The air is coming from the lungs, passing over, or the air is coming from either direction. Either way, we've got air that's passing by, and that's allowing these to rattle. And somehow the brain and our ability to get what's going on up here, down here, and then out is enabling all of this fancy positioning to happen in order to elicit these wonderful sounds that you guys get to hear day in, day out. So anyway, pretty cool. Birds, they make some beautiful noises. They have a little extra stuff going on, but similar type of action here. Yeah. So anyway, let's get away from the larynx, move down into the trachea. Again, we see these cartilaginous rings. They're incomplete. We also see a similar epithelial lining that we saw with the upper respiratory tract. It extends from the larynx down to what we call the primary bronchi. And we're going to see that the wall of the trachea, what's called the adventitia, kind of the outer, and then kind of underneath that adventitia. So the most superficial aspect of the trachea is what we call this adventitia. It's basically, it's a lot like, it's almost like fascia. Okay. So we got a little sheath called the adventitia. And then the next layer we get is that those cartilaginous rings. And then we get our epithelial lining. So epithelium, connective tissue, right? Cartilage is a type of connective tissue. Okay. Right. And again, the trachea, the lumen is going to be, or the lining of the trachea. We're going to have some mucosal aspects. So the goblet cells are going to be pretty active. Okay. All right. So why are these C shaped instead of O shaped? Well, we're looking at a superior view. So this is like a bird's eye view, looking down into the trachea, down into the esophagus, and then we can also see a cervical vertebra here. Okay. So when we swallow food, it goes into the esophagus. Okay, that's your food tube. So the esophagus is going to expand. Generally, when we're not eating, the esophagus is pretty flat on itself. So you can kind of see that there. In fact, in the morning, you take your first drink of water, it kind of opens up or stretches out that esophagus a little bit. But yeah, when you start eating food and swallowing food, these little boluses or boli, you can see we do need some room to expand that esophagus. So we've got a little bit of room in the back and a little bit of room in the front. And again, you can see the ciliated epithelium. Okay. So as we get down, and trachea means trunk. So we're kind of looking at the lower respiratory tract is kind of like an upside down tree. So when we look at the lower respiratory tract, again, we start with the trachea, which again basically means trunk, right? And the trunk of the trachea is going to have two large branches called bronchi. So you're going to have the right bronchi and the left bronchi, or the right bronchus. One is a bronchus, right bronchus, left bronchus. Okay. Together, two are called bronchi. Okay. So the right bronchus, and again, these are what they call the primary bronchi. Okay. They're the first ones. Now, this is an actual plaster cast or plastic cast of the air spaces of the lungs. See, it's pretty cool. There's a lot of different convolutions there and branches. Now, and we'll look at these in just a few little more detail in just a second. But one thing I want you to notice about the pathway of air, right? As air travels down the trachea, it is going to take. It's going to go to both lungs, but notice that it's going to continue on more of a right side pathway or right side tract. And again, this is the patient's right. So on our screen, it's on the left, right? Left, right? Oh, that's confusing. Anyway, this is the right lung over here, is my point. So anyway, you notice how the trachea does kind of continue and tapers a little bit into that right primary bronchus, whereas the left primary bronchus almost looks like an off ramp. So what we end up seeing is a smaller left lung than right lung. Okay. We also would potentially see if something were to be inhaled and make it this far down into the lower respiratory tract, the right side is probably where it's going to lodge itself. Now, can it go over here? Well, of course. But again, this is more like a continuous kind of a curved road with an off ramp. So it's not bilaterally symmetrical, is my point. So it's not right down the middle and left lung, right lung, both are identical. Nope, not the case. And again, why is that? Well, you can envision the heart sitting right in here. And we said the heart is a little bit left of center. So that's what we have going on there. So anyway, the primary bronchi enter the lung and then divide into what we call the secondary bronchi. And then they're going to branch into tertiary bronchi. Even we do have tertiary bronchi, and as well as what we call bronchioles. A bronchiole is just the smallest of the bronchi, and we're toward the end of the line and heading into ultimately the air sacs or the alveolar ducts. So that's what this is going to show is a terminal bronchiole. So at the end of each of these these are bronchioles, all of these out here. Okay, these are all bronchioles. Okay, and then once we get to the end of a bronchiole, they call it the terminal bronchiole, and that's where you're going to find the alveoli. One is an alveolus, multiple are alveoli. And notice again, these are going to be surrounded in capillary networks. This is where we're going to have gas exchange. So oxygen's coming in. It's going to diffuse to an area where there's less oxygen, which is going to be in this capillary network from that low oxygen blood that the heart just pumped over to the lungs via that pulmonary artery. Okay, so the pulmonary arteries just all kind of spread out into smaller and smaller arterioles until they get to the capillary networks of each of these alveoli. Okay, so then carbon dioxide leaves, oxygen comes in, and now we send that blood back to the left side of the heart. Whew, we already knew this. So now, well, we knew air comes into the lungs and air goes out of the lungs. Well, now, oxygen goes in, carbon dioxide goes out. We also knew blood went from the heart over to the lungs and then back from the lungs over to the heart. So you guys knew that maybe before you took this class. Well, now you can get a little more specific. You can say the right side of the heart. Even more specific, the right ventricle is sending blood over to the lungs, specifically to these alveoli of the lungs, to the alveolar capillary networks. So when we say blood goes from the heart to the lungs, we really are saying the right ventricle ejects blood into the pulmonary trunk and pulmonary arteries that take the blood ultimately to these pulmonary capillaries at the alveoli, where we drop off the oxygen or drop off the CO2, pick up the oxygen, ship that blood back in a pulmonary vein or pulmonary veins to the left atrium of the heart. So that pulmonary circuit from right ventricle back to the left atrium with the lungs in the middle, this is specifically where we're going. So as you guys are studying unit 8 and getting into unit 9, as you're studying the cardiovascular system and the heart and the path of blood, and you're studying the respiratory system and the path of air from outside to the terminus at the alveoli, now you can put these things together and start using your terminology. Okay, start using your terminology, and as you are working on understanding uh, the basics of the cardiovascular and respiratory connection. All right. Let's see. There's a surfactant, by the way, a surface lubricant. So those alveoli need to stay hydrated. We can reduce some of the friction that occurs. There's a lot of action, right? These alveoli are expanding and contracting as we fill them up and empty them, fill them up and empty them. So the surfactant helps the alveoli to helps with their elasticity and helps kind of reduce surface tension. Okay, so here's an alveoli or an alveolus. One is an alveolus. Okay, so we just exchange gases. And again, gas exchange works in a simple way of what we call diffusion. A lot of gas goes to where, or gas is going to move to where there's a lot of it to where there's less of it. So there's a lot of carbon dioxide in the blood that's going to the lungs. There's not much carbon dioxide in the air we're breathing in. So carbon dioxide is naturally going to diffuse into the alveoli. At the same time, the blood that's coming to the lungs has little to no oxygen. The alveoli or that air sac's full of oxygen, so it's kind of like waiting for the bus or waiting for the train or waiting at the monorail or whatever, and finally gets there and the doors open, and all that oxygen can go from an area of high concentration in the alveoli to an area of low concentration in the bloodstream. So you've got this kind of cross exchange going on of CO2 out of the blood, oxygen into the blood. It all deals with concentration gradient. Okay. I don't know what. Oh, that's this. This is just FYI again. Alveoli are what accomplish the gas exchange. And again, there's going to be a mucus blanket as well, along with that surfactant. Now the lungs are, as a whole, are the organs that kind of contain this respiratory tree. So these alveoli and bronchi and bronchioles are all contained within the lungs. Okay, and the lungs they're cone shaped. So we're going to see what's called an apex at the top and a base at the bottom. The base is what attaches to the diaphragm. In the central area of each lung, or the medial portion of each lung, you're going to see what's called a hilum. And the hilum is where the right and left primary bronchi are going to enter into the lungs. It's also where the pulmonary arteries go in and the pulmonary veins come out. It's also where some lymphatic tubes, basically anything that needs to get inside of the lungs has to go in through the hilum. We'll see this term hilum when we get to the kidneys as well. We'll see it. The spleen has a hilum. Kidneys have a hilum. So we'll see hilum again later on. So anyway, as we look at the lungs as a macro whole, we see that the right lung again is larger. It has 3 lobes, what we call the superior, middle, and inferior lobes. And then the left lung just has a superior and inferior, just has superior and inferior lobes. You also notice some different terminology on this slide regarding the primary, secondary, and tertiary bronchi. We do see the main bronchi, also called primary anyway, primary and main, right? They're basically mean the same thing. So you have the left and right primary bronchi or the left and right main bronchi. Then we have the lobar or secondary, and then segmental or tertiary. And then finally, that takes us into the bronchioles at that point. Okay, and then lastly, there it is, pleura. I just wanted to mention the lungs do have a double layer around them. We call it the pleura. And the visceral pleura is what's right up against the surface of the lungs. And then we're going to have a little pleural space or pleural cavity in between the visceral pleura and then what we call the parietal pleura. So the parietal pleura is going to line the rib cage, and then the visceral pleura is right up against the lungs. And then there's a little cavity in between. We're not going to get in too deep with that. I do want to mention those. We talk about these quite a bit next semester when we do respiratory physiology. We'll get into respiratory volumes. We'll also talk about pneumothorax and punctured lungs. And so yeah, we'll look at the pleura and the importance of those pleura. And then of course we know the thoracic cavity and the mediastinum as well. And again, what's the function of the thorax is basically to be able to expand and allow for the lungs to expand and contract and allow for the lungs to contract. So we have the diaphragm and your intercostal muscles that help with that. Yeah, Drew Brees. Yeah, condolences, Stephanie. But you have, I think, Jameis Winston, and he's no slouch. So you never know, right? Things happen for a reason. Yeah, Drew Brees. And I thought I read, I maybe misread, or it was miswritten. I'm going to say it was miswritten because I can't imagine I would misread anything. But I could have sworn it sounded like he had a punctured lung and or at least a couple broken ribs the week before, and he didn't know. They didn't know, and he played through that game, and then he took a really hard hit the last game, and that kind of aggravated. And that's when they found, oh man, you've got a couple broken ribs, a punctured lung. Yeah, ouch. So we'll talk about pneumothorax and punctured lungs and those different layers as well. Yeah, right. So, oof. Yeah, he's getting up there, and the body isn't as resilient certainly as it once was. But yeah, and he's not a real big guy. I think he's only he's right around 6 feet, which is not. He might be less than that, which for a quarterback is pretty short actually. So he's had a heck of a career, and yeah, 5'10". So yeah, he's not a real big dude. So but I think he went to Purdue. He's fairly local. He's a Midwestern guy, so we like him. Tony Romo too, right, from Burlington, Wisconsin. Oddly enough, home of chocolate and Tony Romo. It was at the Willy Wonka's factory over there in Burlington. So anyway, that's pretty much it. There's not a heck of a lot left. This is just another nice, pretty kind of closure slide showing you we'll add the ribs into the mix. You can see that first rib, the clavicle's kind of coming in. You can see the sternum, the manubrium, the clavicle comes in like this, right over that first rib and that apex of the lung. So yeah, we got to be careful in that area. This is a zone that the brachial plexus, big carotid arteries, jugular veins, major nerve supply out to the arms and shoulders, subclavian veins, subclavian arteries, brachial. So we've got a lot going on just in this little triangle right here. We talked about this triangle up here. There's another triangle that's very kind of like a not it's like a danger spot. There's a name for it. It's like contraindicated for like putting pressure in certain spots, right? The one being this triangle, the anterior triangle, and then you've got another little triangle right in here where the trapezius and the sternocleidomastoid and trachea all kind of. Anyway, that's a spot. You can see the top of the lung is right there as well. So anyway, that's it for you guys. You guys have any questions about anything? Why does the right lung have? Oh, because again, because of the heart. So right lung is three lobe. We have the superior, middle, and inferior. Left lung is just superior and inferior. It's slightly smaller, again, because of the position of the heart, or primarily. Now, I also wanted to mention, I think I did earlier when we were doing muscles, we talked about the diaphragm and the importance of the diaphragm with respiration. We do see that parietal pleura and then the fascia that covers the diaphragm, we see those connected. So whenever the diaphragm flattens out, it's going to pull the lungs with it. So again, next semester, we're going to go a little, that's kind of where we segue with respiratory for advanced, is start looking at, all right, well, how do these lungs work? We know the structures, we know air gets in and it ultimately is going to exchange some gas at the in the alveoli, but how does air get in there? Well, we'll look at that. What are the volumes of air? Okay, so we'll look at that as well. We'll look at COPDs a little bit more. We'll look at chronic bronchitis and asthma and some of the hypermucus production. We do a little bit with COVID as well next semester, and some of the other respiratory illnesses and viral infections, these SARS viruses that we're seeing. It just hyper mucus everything up and almost turns things into an autoimmune situation where the body just, it's like we pull the fire alarm and then one department shows up and then another department. You just start getting more and more and more. It's like too many cooks in the kitchen. And that's what we're seeing with some of these enzymes and inhibitors and chemicals involved with the immune system response when there is a virus. So COVID, for whatever reason, triggers a pretty intense or potentially, right? And everybody's different, just like any disease, right? We could get a cold, right? Like a rhinovirus or some other cold, and all respond differently or be completely asymptomatic. Some of us are going to get a fever and the chills and the achy joints, and some of us are going to have some breathing issues. Some of us, I mean, there's even GI involvement. Some people have the poops and the runs and the pukes with COVID, just like other cold viruses that we've seen. It is it's unique in other ways, though, but it's nothing that I think, again, if we just keep doing what we're doing and stay hydrated, take care of business, and while still having some sense of, like, being who we are, we got to take care of each other. So anyway, I'm going to leave you guys alone. You've got plenty of work to do this weekend. If you haven't done unit 6 and 7, get those knocked out. Start looking at unit 8. We've already gone through everything in unit 8. So if you haven't started working on the unit 8 portfolio, go back and watch the video. We go through that a little bit. And then you've got a couple exams to take. You've got a couple Padlets to do. So there's plenty to do in unit 8. So we did start unit 9. There's no rush. I'm not trying to say, all right, unit 8's done, everything's due now. That's not the case. Everything's due December 11th. So we're just going to keep plugging away. Next Tuesday we do digestion, and then it's Thanksgiving, and we'll come back from Thanksgiving, do a little bit of kidneys and a little bit of urinary, and we'll look at the final exam a little bit and kind of give you some idea of what's going on with that. It's not going to be anything crazy. You guys will do extremely well. It's nothing you have to worry about. But then that's it. That takes us to finals week. So that pretty much does it. I'm going to stop recording.